Nowadays, queer films are gaining great recognition in the world cinema, and the success of some Chinese language films, such as Happy Together and The Wedding Banquet, has given great impetus to Chinese queer films. But the strict censorship system and the differences that exist in different social cultures have always been the obstacles to the development of Chinese queer films. In the development of queer films, many mainland China films are still stuck in analyzing the cause of how queer identity is constructed, the exclusion and degradation of their sexuality, and the hardship of their lives. The public's acceptance of the queer communities is too low, and they are not viewed among the Chinese films. The development of queer films in Hong Kong and Taiwan is more mature than that in mainland China. The themes and contents are also more diverse and show the living conditions and emotional world of the LGBT community more deeply. Due to the social incomprehension and rejection of homosexuality in mainland China at that time, queer films in the 1990s mainly separated and grew in Hong Kong and Taiwan, especially before and after Hong Kong's return to China. A large number of well-received queer films emerged. Hong Kong queer films are a significant presence in Chinese cinema as a way of presenting the survival of marginalized groups in society. Its emergence and development has been accompanied by a change in society attitude towards LGBT issues. In Hong Kong, LGBT has always been an aloof and conservative issue, and in the 1980s, Hong Kong called queer films 同志 films, which means homosexual in Chinese. In June 1983, the Law Reform Commission of Hong Kong published the report on the study of the law relating to same-sex sexual activity, which proposed that the law should not prosecute sexual activity between consenting males over the age of 21 in private. The proposal roused strong opposition from many Hong Kong people who believed that homosexuality was a mental illness that needed to be treated. They submitted a petition against the legalization of homosexuality, criticizing Hong Kong law for ignoring public opinion and public health. After this, Hong Kong queers, who had been living underground for many years, chose the attitude of don't ask, don't tell in the face of their families and began to receive formal rebuke from the world. It was only after 1997 that the Hong Kong government set up the Equal Opportunities Funding Scheme to promote equal opportunities for LGBT groups. The situation of queer films finally got improved. Before the 1990s, films about queer in mainland China were not involved, basically in a state of dissonance, without any real concern for the survival of LGBT community in reality. In the 1990s, queer film began to develop in diversified direction, and this stage was in the exploration period. Queer films entered the public eyes with many excellent LGBT films from 1992 to 1997. Lots of major film festivals around the world set up special awards for queer-themed films, and the queer films won many awards in the festivals. After that, in Hong Kong, many excellent queer films have emerged gradually coming out of the closet and winning awards at the international level. During this period, queer films began to face the LGBT community and finally became a genre of films. Queer films were not just an element in film like before, But the quality and artistic sense of the film also increased significantly, and the expression form gradually diverged. One of the representative works of Hong Kong queer films is Happy Together by Wong Kar-wai. As a local film director living in Hong Kong, like most Hong Kong directors, Wong Kar-wai's works are invariably concerned with local social issues in Hong Kong. The Chinese language film Happy Together, directed by Wong Kar-wai, is a transnationalism film, which is essentially about two men from Hong Kong, China, who moved to Argentina. Transnationalism refers to a group of immigrants who live outside of their countries. They have close and strong ties to their country of origin, even though they are outside of it. These immigrant groups retain the customs, cultures, religions, and languages of their countries of origin as they travel across the geopolitical context. The spread of transnationalism made the world become more globalized, and this has made many countries dependent on immigrant groups for migrant labor forces. In the film, transnationalism across national boundaries and geography through the production and dissemination of images in different countries, which is realized circular relations and global development. Cinema speaks the national, and the national speaks of cinema. The image treating and dissemination made transnationalism films became diverse. The style and content of the film and media were also affected. However, due to the diversified structure and unstable politicals and geoculture, Chinese films have resulted in a dispersive and chaotic situation. The film Happy Together, directed by Hong Kong's New Wave director Wong Kar-wai, is filmed in Argentina and Hong Kong with multiple different languages and touches on colonialism, sexual orientation, and identity. As a British colony, Hong Kong has a highly modernized commodity economy, culture, and urban atmosphere. Besides, as a separate island from China, it has its own accumulation of traditional Chinese culture. At that time, the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region was about to return to mainland. The British government was about to withdraw from the colony, and Hong Kong people were uncertain about their identity. The first shot of the film shows the passports of the two men, but soon the passports don't define who they are and what is their real identity. The sense of belonging that Leo Fai said in the film also implies the sense of belonging of Hong Kong people. The couple, Ho Po Wen and Leo Fai, wanted to maintain their relationship and made more money. Then they moved to Argentina. In the film, they were involuntarily forced to leave their countries of origin because of their sexual orientation, and both of them are diaspora. They are far away from their country of origin and looking for a sense of belonging and identity in other country, but they also long to return home. Happy Together is set in Hong Kong in the 1990s. Although attitudes towards homosexuality around the world has become more and more tolerant at that time, Hong Kong homosexuals still endured varying degree of discrimination and alienation. Hong Kong was colonialized by the British. The prohibition of homosexuality in Hong Kong is the legacy of colonial law. In the film Happy Together, after Leo Fai decided to return to Hong Kong, he called and wrote a letter to his father to get his father's understanding and forgiveness. Influenced by colonialism, They lived in an unacceptable political atmosphere, which forced them to leave their home. They knew that they were essentially unwanted, and they did not belong there. Both the film's subject matter and ideology are officially banned in China, but it has won high-profile awards overseas, which reflects the transnationalism implicit in thinking about the local role of the state. These transnational queer film studies essentially advocate for making all film studies transnational while considering not only their common geopolitical and cultural context, but also the queer global relationship. Faced with China's conservative attitude towards queer films, it is not only Hong Kong that tries to film the LGBT community. Taiwan director Ang Lee expressed his reflection on the traditional Chinese concept of marriage customs in The Wedding Banquet, which also positively answers the question of queer identity. Ang Lee's film, The Wedding Banquet, is a typical Hollywood-style Chinese film that explores the cultural clash and intersection between China and the West in a light comedical spread. The film tells the story of Gao Weitong, a Chinese man living in America, and his boyfriend Simon, who have to ask Wei Wei, a girl, to help them create another lie, in order to cover up the lie that they are gay. After a farce of fake marriage, it finally comes to a tragic comic happy ending. The story reflects the friction and collision of different Chinese and Western family concepts and cross-cultural exchanges. At the same time, the film also includes an exploration of the social culture of the time, traditional Chinese marriage, and the conflict between family and personal freedom. For a long time, the people of China who are bound by tradition are accustomed to the conservatism of Eastern civilization, and they are not very sensitive to sex. This sensitivity is deeply imprinted in the genes of Chinese people in thousands of years of culture. Resulting in today's China, people are still unable to talk freely about the topic of sex. The arrival of Wei Tong's parents in the film represents a clash of Eastern and Western cultures. The main clash is between the traditional patriarchal and feudally Oriental culture and the Western civilization, which is devoted to individual will. Whether it is Wei Tong's mother's passion for Chuanshan or his father's study of calligraphy, as well as the gift they prepared for their daughter-in-law-to-be that contain Chinese elements such as red envelopes and jewelry, it is clear that the Gao family is a devoted follower of traditional Eastern culture. In China, marriage and filial piety have been tied together since ancient times, and marriage is not only a personal matter, but also a matter of dignity and faith for the whole family. The Chinese people like saving face, and the former character are shown to the fullest here. The Wedding Banquet shows the interpretation of sex in a straightforward way. Chinese people have always been used to suppressing their physical and mental instincts under the constraints of conservative traditional culture and institution. But in the Wedding Banquet, held by Wei Tong's parents for Wei Tong and Wei Wei, the lack of restraint of the Chinese is no longer formal, even surprising the Westerns. It is as if it is only on such special grand occasions when alcohol released the shackles of traditional from them, when all order and custom are temporarily broken, that they can face their true desire in human nature. In the traditional Chinese concept, no matter how much a person achieves in their careers, they must eventually return to married and have children to ensure a family legacy. Otherwise, they are considered unfilial. With this concept, personal happiness has actually become tied to filial piety under a patriarchal society. In contrast, Western believe that marriage is not about continuing traditions, but is formed because of love, a testimony to an emotional union of individuals. Therefore, Wei Tong and Simon's homosexuality can be developed in the US, but hardly exposed to the deeply moral Chinese, who want to act as filial son in the traditional sense, but want to be true to themselves. In fact, Wei Tong's father knew the truth during Wei Tong and Simon's argument in English, but he pretends not to understand in order to escape the reality of impact of Western culture because he is trying to save face. But in the end, he chooses to compromise. The film ends with a reconciliation between the father and Wei Tong, reflecting the tolerance and understanding between the two generations and symbolizing the intermingling of the two cultures. Different cultures lead to differences in lifestyles and values, including differences in diet, differences in family values, and differences in moral etiquette. At the end of the wedding banquet, the compromise of Wei Tong's parents shows that it is not impossible to integrate Chinese and Western cultures. In the process of cross-cultural communication, it is necessary to understand each other's culture in order to better understand each other's behavior and values. Under the trend of globalization, Chinese and Western cultures have become more and more integrated, influencing the new generation together. I believe that under the influence of queer films from Hong Kong and Taiwan, more Chinese language queer films productions will emerge. I also hope that someday in the future, the LGBT community will be able to gain full equality and respect.